Welcome back to another episode of the Middle Order Cricket Podcast. I've been joined by two new guests for you. We've got Isar Hussain. Izzy, say hello, Izzy. We've got Muhammed Hussain as well. Guys, you've joined me today to talk a little bit about the India versus England result. 3 weeks ago, India pulled off one of their most memorable victories against Australia, and today they've just been humbled by England. Izzy, was it arrogance? Were India arrogant that they were going to beat this England team regardless of who turned up?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just a case of India being outplayed. If you look at the teams itself, in comparison, on paper, the industry much stronger. Unfortunately, the game's not played on paper. I don't think it's down to arrogance. It's just a case of this India team's underperformed, and there's no doubt in the coming games they're going to be back to somewhere their best anyway. But I do believe maybe the difference, a case of going full strength. Some of the senior guys coming in probably added pressure, even though they may argue there's no pressure. See the lads who performed a few weeks ago, newcomers to the team, just got out there and express themselves, which in a sense can be slightly easier. So you'd say, 3 or 4 substantial changes from the two teams in terms of experience anyway. So I feel as if it was just a case of this particular game, the England team were just completely on top of their game. Yep. And even my personal opinion before the series started, if England are going to get anywhere, it's going to be down to individual brilliance. And we've seen at least 3 or 4 in this game.
Yep.
And I think that's going to be key if England have to get anywhere, because obviously it's only one game in. A lot can happen in over 4 games, and you expect India to come back strong. But I do think it was a case of just England outplaying India.
So Hussain, obviously England played very well, but if we just turn to India for a moment, do you think they were at all arrogant in the way they prepared for this match?
In terms of arrogance, I think there's always a bit of arrogance when you're talking about Virat Kohli and the way he goes about playing cricket. But no, I'd agree with Izzy there. I think England just were the better team for the 5 days. They were patient in the way they played. They outsmarted India in terms of the way they batted. I felt like India, if anything, took England's spinners lightly. I don't think the Indians expected Leach and Best to bowl as well as they did. So no, I don't think it was arrogance. It was just more of England as being the better side, being the more professional side over the 5 days, and that showed in the final result. England were just dominant throughout the 5 days. So I think it was more of Joe Root and England's bowling being brilliant rather than the Indian arrogance.
I think it was more confidence, and I think they were a little overconfident and probably not arrogant.
Yep. Hussain, if you had to pick a star performer out, and let's just have a look at the scorecard quickly. Obviously, England winning quite comfortably by 227 runs. If you had to pick a couple of star performers out, who would you pick?
Well, I think the obvious one will be Joe Root on day 1 and day 2, dominated with the bat and just carried on that form they had in Sri Lanka. Him and Dom Sibley, that partnership on day 1 really set the scene for India. The way Joe Root, especially how he played the spinners, how he swept, it was phenomenal, and he's just been carrying on this run of form now. But I think another one that's going to probably be played on the radar a bit was James Anderson today. I think India would have came out today with, I guess, the ambition of at least drawing the game, but that spell that he bowled to Gill and then to Rahane, I believe, was really what changed the game completely and what turned really into a predictable draw, maybe into pretty much a one-sided England win. So I think while Root set the scene on day 1 and day 2, I think it was Anderson really that, even though his figures might not look great or might not stand out, with that spell really, just phenomenal use of reverse swing, that really changed the game. So I think those two would be my standout performers.
And Izzy, a word on the spinners. How do you think they performed?
Yeah, well, it's funny you should mention that. I made a note of who I felt stood out in terms of individual brilliance, and there was 4 of them, and 2 have been mentioned, which are the obvious ones. But the spinners, I think they're going to the radar. They're not Swan, they're not Panesar, but if you look at their stats, and cricket is statistic based, 300 plus and 150 almost respectively in terms of wickets in first class. They're very new to international cricket. One of them's played 13 tests, the other 10. I think they've performed reasonably well. Yeah. Borderline reasonably well to excellent. So can't doubt their credentials considering the lack of experience. I do feel they get, slightly unfair criticism, but that probably comes with the territory. For me, Moeen Ali is a better spinner. However, the other 2 are in form. You've got to play them. It's as simple as that. And going back to what Hussain said, I just wanted to add to the performance of Anderson and what's his face, Joe Root. I think again, I don't think we realise the magnitude of those performances just in this series alone and the previous series. For Root first, he's gone past some great English names just in a few games. Alex Stewart, I made a note of this somewhere. Stewart, Gower, KP in terms of runs, and then in terms of scoring 100 in his 100th match. I mean, the only other guys who have done that are
some of the best around.
Me and Dad, Izzy, Greenwich, Amla, Graham Smith, Alex Stewart. There's only about 7 or 8 guys who've scored 100 in their 100th test, and he's 30 years old. You'd think he's got 5 years, potentially 6. If he scores the way he's scoring, there's no reason why he can't score 13,000 runs.
Yep.
So the magnitude of what he's done, brilliant. 26 tests as well. As a captain, he's won, equalled Vaughan's record. So again, brilliant from his individual performance as well as a skipper. And then lastly, again, going back to Jimmy Anderson, I read a stat today, I think it was on one of the platforms, might have been Instagram, 270 wickets since he's 31. So from the age of 31 to 38, as a fast bowler, taking 270 wickets. I mean, some guys have been playing cricket all their careers. There's one West Indian current bloke. Throughout his career, he's stuck on 200. Anderson's achieved 270 in 7 years from 37 to 38. That's unheard of.
Yeah. So if we go back to India and their preparation, firstly, let's just a quick word about the pitch. The pitch was incredibly flat for 2 days, and whoever was going to bat first was going to take the biggest advantage. It happened to be England who won the toss and batted first and made, obviously, that mammoth score. Hussain, do you think the groundsman is going to be looking for a new job?
Well, if you look at India historically, especially Chennai, it's always really been a bat first and that big sort of wicket. India's always kind of had that stigma attached to it, actually the subcontinent as a whole. But I think one of the most interesting things that I found was that, we were talking earlier about England wanting to bat big, get that big 600, and that at least stems from that last tour England had in India where they would get around 450, and then the Indians, I remember Karun Nair got a big 100. Kohli did really well in that last tour and kind of hammered England, and England would lose by an innings or 10 wickets. So there was that mental sort of pressure that England were in where we need to get sort of big wickets. Like when you come to India, when you come to these countries, you kind of expect with flat wickets. And I think there's an element of, we talk about that bat and ball and how bat really dominates. I think the groundsman, to be fair, did a good job because that pitch by day 3 and 4 was showing signs of life. And then today as well, the ball was turning and then there was a reverse swing. So I think this was quite a good cricket wicket, to be honest. It was there. Our result was there for the taking for either of the teams, to be fair. Obviously,
yeah, I appreciate what you're saying about the pitch changing, but don't you think it changed too much from being very flat to very friendly? And the fact that a pitch does that gives a very strong advantage to whoever is batting first. Whereas if we compare that to the 2 Pakistani pitches, while the batting team won both times, it had quite a lot for the bowlers throughout the match rather than specific days only.
Yeah, I presume I guess that you're right in that point. And it's kind of, I don't really like that sort of wicket in my own sense where it does change that much.
Izzy, we talked about the English spinners earlier. In terms of India, their second and third spinners, some would say are very average. So Washington, Sundar and Nadeem. Just a word on them as bowlers and whether they should be playing.
I like both of them. I like both of them, and I'll tell you why. I think persistence is key. I felt as if they did do their part. It's just a case of they were up against a couple of guys who were in real form in the notion of Joe Root and Stokes, and Sibley persisted earlier on, and you need someone to play that role. It's not pretty, but someone needs to play that role. But going back to the spinners, look, the left arm off spinner, I think he's a good spinner. Yeah, he's been around for a while, heaps of experience, tons of first-class wickets. On the other hand, you've got another young guy who bowls decent line in terms of what he does with the ball. They're not obviously Ashwin, and they're not Jadeja. When he comes back, I'm guessing he'll make a difference. My argument would be whether they should play a 2 or 3. Now, if you're going back to the toss and going back to the conditions of the pitch, you've got to try and cater for everything. You can't just say, I'm going to play 3 spinners, but then we've got to hope we bat first. Maybe you should have just played 2 and maybe a seam bowling all-rounder if they have one.
Yeah, and somebody who'll be well involved in that decision-making process will be Virat Kohli, who has now captained India in several games, but in his last 4 captained matches, he's lost all 4. His batting hasn't quite hit the heights of maybe the previous, couple of years. maybe in the last 18 months or so, he's not performed as well as he possibly did before that. Rahane it was who led India through the Australia series to victory, and some would say his attitude on the pitch and the way he gets the best out of his players is actually more suited to a captain's role than Virat Kohli. Hussain, start me off. What's your opinion on Virat Kohli as a captain?
I don't really rate him as a captain. I think that it's one of those things where he has a really good team that backs him up, especially if you look at his record. Really, is really a home-dominated record. I think Kohli, his antics on the pitch, just put me off. Really, I think he's someone that's over-aggressive. He plays the cameras, great player, but I think that the attitude that he brings really, I think, makes India. It really puts India down as a team. I think. Where I think Rahane is probably a camera personality. He can get more out of the younger players. I think if you're a young player in that Indian dressing room, there's a level of intimidation that you have with a guy like Virat Kohli, where he's this great player and he really demands the best out of everyone. And I think in that sense, India are kind of hampered. And I think Kohli would be better suited just to be the batsman. I think India, with the great captains, if you look at them, they're not normally the best players in the team. For example, if we mentioned Michael Vaughan earlier, he wasn't the best player in this team. Rahane, he's someone that suits that role more. He's calmer. I do have doubts over whether or not he makes the team.
Izzy, should Kohli lose this series as a test, this test series against England? Do you think he should continue on in the role, or do you think it's time for a replacement? If that is the case, obviously we've still got 3 tests to go.
Certainly not mid-series. I can't see it happening, especially with how India have their setup. After the series, potentially, yeah. It just seems to be you've got 2 complete different types of leadership skills. Both have worked. One of them's not working right now, so it's easy to criticise one. But look, both are really good players, really good leaders in their own way. So if it was to happen, wouldn't be a surprise. But then on the other hand, you do feel performances with how they've panned out recently. There's arguments for both cases.
So Hussain, top performance from England. Give me a prediction for the rest of the series.
Well, a prediction, it's really always hard to predict with India and England. But I'll stick my neck on the line to say that I think we'll have a draw at least somewhere, maybe Ahmedabad, because that's been historically flat. So, and I'd say, I would put India at least winning 1. So I'll go with them. I'll be a bit cheeky and say 2-1 England.
Izzy, how do you see the next 3 tests playing out?
Yeah, I'm going to go with my initial prediction of 2-1 England as well, as it happens, which the bigger picture doesn't suit either of them, because then that means Australia go through to the final.
Yeah.
So I'm going with 2-1 England. If I'm being really optimistic, I'd like to say 3-0 or 4-0 or even 3-1, but that wouldn't help either. I just can't see India not performing to their level. I think they will hit some kind of height in respect of winning a game anyway, but I'm going with 2-1 England.
Okay, for my own part, I enjoy an England defeat more than anything else, so I'm hoping for a 3-1 India victory from here.
As an Englishman, I was looking for my English shirts, and as it happens, the one day I need one, I can't find one. So, as an Englishman, I'm obviously going to go with 2-1 England.
Maybe next time. Well, guys, thanks very much for joining me today. Hopefully, we'll meet again over the test series.
Thanks for having us.